You know that feeling when you're trying so hard to find some peace of mind, but you just end up more stressed out than when you started? Well, there's this incredible ancient text that has the perfect analogy for that. It says our efforts can be like trying to cook sand. Think about it. You can heat it for eons, but it will never, ever become a delicious meal. So what if the problem isn't how hard we're trying, but the ingredients we're using?
Right, so let's get into it. Today, we are diving deep into a teaching from a massive Zen text called the宗Lu, which means Record of the Source Mirror. And we're going to explore this very idea, why our search for happiness so often feels like we're just, well, boiling sand.
So, right off the bat, the text gives us a diagnosis. It says the whole reason we struggle, the reason we get trapped in these loops of anxiety and confusion, is because we've made a huge, fundamental mistake. We're using the wrong tools for the job because we've completely misunderstood what our own mind actually is.
And according to the宗Lu, this big mistake comes from not even realizing that we're operating from what it calls two fundamental roots. Now, you can think of these like two totally different operating systems for your consciousness. One is the root of pretty much all of our suffering and confusion, and the other, that's the root of enlightenment and peace. The wild part is, we spend almost our entire lives running on the wrong one.
Okay, so this is really the heart of the matter. The宗Lu calls these two roots two different minds. There's the true mind, or Zhensing, and then there's the deluded mind, the Wongsing. And getting the difference between these two, well, that's the whole key to stopping the cycle of boiling sand.
Now, when you see it laid out like this, the contrast is just wow. The deluded mind, that's the one we think of as me, our inner monologue, is described as the actual root of suffering. Its whole job is to just cling to things, sights, sounds, ideas, worries, anything external. And the text has this incredible metaphor for it. We're mistaking a thief for our own son. We let this chattering imposter into our house, and it just robs us blind of our own peace. But then you have the true mind. This is our original nature, pure, complete. It's the source of enlightenment, the quiet, spacious awareness that's always there underneath the chaos.
But I get it, this can all sound a little bit out there, right? A little abstract. So what does this deluded, clinging mind actually feel like in your own day-to-day experience?
Well, the text really does not hold back. It paints this incredibly intense picture. It says our ordinary mind is restless like a monkey, just constantly jumping from one thought branch to the next. It's as fickle as a wild horse, changing direction at every whim. It burns through our energy like fire. It spins with this chaotic energy, like a wheel of fire you'd see in the dark. And it moves faster, more relentlessly than a rushing waterfall. Does any of that sound familiar? Because that's the mind we're trying to work with. So, if that's the chaotic mind we're dealing with, how in the world do you break free? Knowing about these two minds is one thing, but how do you actually experience the true mind? Well, the text brings up that classic Zen analogy of the finger pointing at the moon to explain that there are two very different ways of knowing. So on one side, you've got intellectual understanding, which is called shuo tong. This is all about words, concepts, ideas, everything we're talking about right now, actually. And the text says this is really important for beginners, but it's also totally incomplete. It's like that old story of the blind men describing an elephant. One grabs the trunk, one grabs the leg, and they all think they know the whole animal. This is the finger. It can point you in the right direction, but it is not the destination. And then there's direct realization, zongteng. This is an inner knowing, a verification that just goes way beyond words. The text says it's like drinking water and knowing for yourself if it's hot or cold. No one can explain that feeling to you, you just know it. That is seeing the moon itself.
And this brings us to a really crucial question, one that Zen teachers have been asking forever. When you hear these teachings, when you read these books, are you getting tangled up in the words, in the concepts? Are you staring at the finger? Or are you using it to actually look for the moon, the reality that it's pointing to?
So how do we actually make that jump from the finger to the moon? Well, the宗Lu points to this really fascinating and kind of weird method. You prove the deluded mind isn't real by trying as hard as you possibly can to find it. The text brings up a famous story. The Buddha turns to his most brilliant disciple, Ananda, and asks him this really simple question. This mind you're using right now to understand what I'm saying, where is it? Point to it. Show me. And Ananda, this genius, tries 7 different times to locate it. He says, it's inside my body. No, it's outside. It's in my eyes. And every single time, he fails.
And finally, the Buddha tells him, stop. That thing you call your mind, that endless stream of thoughts, that is not your true mind. It's just a flickering reflection, a shadow cast by the world outside. You have mistaken this thief for your own son, and that is the source of all your suffering.
This whole idea of failing to find the mind is so important that it shows up in another legendary story. The second patriarch of Zen, a guy named Huike, comes to the first patriarch, Bodhidharma, and he is a total wreck. He says, "My mind is filled with anxiety. I'm in torment. Please, just give me some peace."
Bodhidharma's response was just brilliant in its simplicity. He just said, "All right, bring me this anxious mind of yours, and I'll pacify it for you." So Huike goes off, and he searches everywhere, high and low, for this solid thing he can call my anxious mind. And he comes back totally defeated and says, "I've searched for the mind, and I can't find it anywhere."
And Bodhidharma's final reply is what triggered Huike's enlightenment. He just says, "There, I have pacified your mind." See, the peace Huike was so desperately looking for didn't come from fixing his anxiety. It came from the direct, gut-level realization that this anxious mind wasn't a solid thing he could ever find in the first place. And how can you possibly fix something that isn't even there?
So what happens when you actually see through this illusion? When you realize that the restless, clinging mind is kind of a phantom? Well, that's when you return to what Zen calls your original face.
And here's the most important part. The true mind isn't something new that you have to build or achieve. It's what has been there the entire time, just covered up by all the noise of the deluded mind. It's like when the clouds finally part, the clear blue sky is revealed. It was never gone. It was just obscured.
And the宗Lu has this beautiful description of this moment of seeing clearly. It says that, for Ananda and the others, their body and mind were completely liberated without any obstruction, and they suddenly knew that their own mind wasn't this little thing trapped inside their skull, but something vast, something that pervaded the 10 directions. You know, maybe the simplest way to wrap all of this up is with one final image. Your true nature, your true mind, is like a vast, deep, and perfectly clear ocean. And all your thoughts, your feelings, your worries, your anxieties, they're just temporary waves on the surface. They pop up, they crest, they fall away, but they never, ever change the fundamental nature of the ocean itself.
So I just want to leave you with one final question, a question that kind of turns this whole thing back on you. Both Ananda and Huike looked everywhere for their troubled minds, and they came up completely empty-handed. So if that restless, anxious mind was never really a solid, findable thing to begin with, when did you ever lose your true, peaceful mind in the first place?